Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel.
Good Lord, what's happened to Ken Kratz? I don't know. That scared me. Well, look, welcome, beautiful people, and welcome to our podcast, our weekly podcast entitled "Reading with Uncle Ken." Now, at the moment, we're on episode 18. And the good news today, guys, is that we're going to be starting a brand new chapter from Ken Kratz's book. If you're following along the podcast series, we're the bone, and of course, being on the bones, this is going to be a very controversial and very interesting chapter indeed. Well, look, welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Silkman, and I'm from the Foul Play team. Thank you for joining us today on our podcast. It's good to be here. And if you like what we do, please subscribe to our channel. We've increased our subscriber number quite considerably, and it's fantastic. All of us want to say a big thank you for subscribing to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much. If you like what we do, if you like our podcast, please give us a thumbs up. And as we've always said, if you have improvements or things that you'd like to see happen on the podcast, please let us know in the chat. We are always monitoring the chat. Just to let you know, over the last week or so, we've done a series of mini Netflix clips, and this has been unbelievably well received in the community. Essentially, what we have been doing is uploading some very short, under 3 minutes generally, clips from Making a Murderer, season number 1. And the intention of doing that is really to encapsulate and summarize some of the major events that took place in season 1. And you can gather there's been a lot of very interesting and very shocking moments. And also for new listeners who've come on board, who are new to the case, have a listen to those. They're only relatively short, and it gives you a fairly good perspective of what Making a Murderer was all about. This is season number 1. My intentions is also to do some small clips from Making a Murderer 2. And again, you know, it's very important to keep the story of Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey very much alive, because, you know, we're seeking the truth and we do want justice. We want justice for Stephen, we want justice for Brendan, and of course, we want justice for Teresa. So look, guys, welcome very much to today's podcast. Joining me today, I have the pleasure to welcome Alice, Bibi, Checking Convictions, Jack61, Just Rhonda, Neverly, Wizard, Zoe, and Sammy. And just to let you know that Checking Convictions and Sammy, probably Zoe as well, will be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, guys, please write them down and we'll try and answer them during the podcast. And like I said, the only thing that we request is, look, guys, please keep it civil, respect one another. You know, we're all here really for the same causes, of course. Try and stay on topic, and we'll try and answer your questions the very best we can. So essentially, guys, what we're doing is we're reading specific passages from Ken Kratz's book, and then I ask a series of questions to the panel, and I gauge their response, and we also get questions from our listening audience. So, guys, what we're going to be doing, we'll start the podcast proper. Now, this is the chapter on the bones. And for those who are relatively new to the case and want a refresher, I just want to let people know that on November the 8th, 2005, human, burnt, cut, and heavily fragmented cremains were found in various locations on the Avery salvage yard and off the Avery salvage yard. On November the 8th, we know that human cremains were found in Stephen Avery's burn pit. However, that wasn't the only location cremains were found. They eventually were found in Yonder Burn Barrel number 2. They were also found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, which is about a mile or so away from Stephen Avery's Avery salvage yard. So they were off Stephen Avery's property. And I believe that there were 4 piles of bones, of cremains that were found in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. So it'll be very interesting to see what Ken Kratz writes about the bones. So not to waste any time, guys, I'm going to start with a quote. And this is from chapter 7, entitled The Bones. I quote, "Forensic anthropologist Leslie Eisenberg is the smartest woman I know. A graduate of New York University, she spent her days in Wisconsin analyzing bones and other human remains, mostly involving Native American burial sites, and being regarded as one of the nation's very best bone experts. Officials called upon her to assist in national tragedies like the World Trade Center attack in 2001 and Hurricane Katrina, when identification of human remains became an increasingly in-demand scientific specialty. And so, with one of the nation's best within our state borders, it was Leslie Eisenberg whom I asked to identify hundreds of tiny pieces of bone fragment, some so brittle that if handled, they would instantly break apart, and determine if they were human, came from one body, were found in the same place, and whether they were burned. And her most important assignment of all, to tell us, if she could, how Teresa Halbach was killed." So as you can see, guys, that's a pretty powerful opening statement by Ken Kratz in his book. And here's the question to the panel. With such a vast array of experience in forensic anthropology, why did Dr. Eisenberg refuse to classify the cremains found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit as being human? So as you can see, guys, we're not mucking around. We're getting straight into it, okay? It's pretty obvious that Ken Kratz buttered her up as being brilliant, highly intelligent, with a huge amount of experience in analyzing human bones. So the question is, how come Dr. Eisenberg refused to classify the cremains found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit as being human? Jack 61, take us away.
That would go against everything he wanted to present. He didn't want to talk about that quarry at all. 20 seconds. I'm going to spend 20 seconds on those at the quarry. That's just a bunch of. That's why he did not want anyone to think anything at the quarry happened at all.
Yep, 100% agree with you, Jack 61. But the issue is, there's no doubt that cremains were found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Leslie Eisenberg was charged and employed to identify human and non-human bones. Yet it was pretty clear, if you go through the court transcripts, she refused to classify those bones. BB.
Jazz Naz says, but she misidentified bones from the other case.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that's the fetus. The chicken bone, the baby chicken that she said was a fetus.
That is correct. Yes. BB, can you remember the actual case, who it was?
Yeah, Christine Rudy.
Correct. Now, Christine,
Where
Christine Rudy, for the listeners that don't know, she was also murdered in very, very, very similar circumstances in the way Teresa Halbach was. And her body, she was shot in the head, her body was cut up, she was dismembered. Part of her body was thrown away in the river, and part of her body was actually burnt. It was very interesting that Dr. Eisenberg was the forensic anthropologist on that case, and she examined a burn pit, and she looked at some of the bones, some of the cremains, and she said, yeah, they're definitely human fetal bones. Several months, right? Several months later, they found the torso of Christine Rudy, and there was a baby inside. So that clearly wasn't still intact. That clearly wasn't human fetal bones. They were bones of an animal, right?
A bird.
And yeah. And it's very interesting that in that case, Eisenberg, she came up with the diagnosis of what those bones were. But very interesting, in this particular case, in the Teresa Halbach case, she refused to classify them. Neverly, thank you. Is that it, Bibi?
Yep.
Thank you so much, Bibi. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Kratz, the state couldn't afford to go down that pathway. They could not afford to talk about human remains somewhere else other than Stevens' burn pit or Avery salvage yard, because that would totally that would totally make it fall apart, their narrative, what they were saying, that she was burnt over there.
Yes,
that's what I feel.
I think you're correct. I think it definitely would have weakened the state's case immensely. Thank you, Neverly. Sammy, do you have a question?
KK there, he redirected the conversation, the case, every chance he got.
Correct. 100% correct. It's pretty obvious that Ken Kratz didn't want to actually talk about those cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Now, keep in mind, guys, that we're going to be going through this chapter, and we're going to see how much he actually does mention the cremains in the county gravel pit. Jack 61.
Just to add to the Rudy situation, for those that may not know or have forgotten, that happened almost at the same time with the Halbach case.
Yeah, like 12 days apart.
Correct. I think it was within a 12-day window. That's when her murder took place as well. So it was very, very interesting. And it happened to be her husband, Sean Rudy, that murdered Christine Rudy. He was having an extramarital affair, and they're on a drunk and drug binge. And very, very interesting that Teresa Halbach was murdered in a very similar manner to the way Christine Rudy was. But of course, there was no hoo-ha associated with that murder like it was with Teresa Halbach, So it's very, very interesting. So the cremains, so here we have a case whereby someone with a huge amount of experience handling cremains, handling bones, she had a lot of experience, and yet she noted the bones in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. She actually wrote a report where she had identified human cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, but somehow she refused to classify pelvic bone fragments as being human. Now, you got to understand, guys, that in the burn pit, in Yonder Burn Barrel number 2, and in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, the cremains were similarly burnt, some were cut, and a lot of them were heavily fragmented. The size of the bone fragments were very, very small, about the size of maybe an inch, 2 inches was about the largest bone fragment. So all the cremains in all 3 different sites were very, very similar. And it's amazing that Dr. Eisenberg refused to do the testing on those cremains to determine whether they were human. So, guys, does anyone have any other opinions? Is it possible that she was under instructions by Ken Kratz not to say what those bones were? Neverly.
Yes. Yes, I think she's a team player for the state. I truly believe that because she was so wishy-washy and she so steered away and she could not do this. And let's just remember that she received a box of bones
Correct.
after the weekend was done, and she refused to even examine them under the microscope, right? So she did a visual examination.
That's correct. That's
Now,
correct.
is that a
And
thorough,
no,
expertly work? No,
no,
of course not.
no,
And
no.
that's huge.
And yes, it is. And what's remarkable is this: in the Christine Rudy case, she actually did get microscopic examination done on those bones. I think it was the FBI or a company that did that examination, and they were able to determine that those bones, those very small bones, were in actual fact animal and not human, which was very, very interesting. Yet, in the Teresa Horbach case, she did not get those bones tested, which was remarkable. Sammy, do you have a comment?
Brownie asked, is there any evidence of Teresa Hallback sleeping with Sean Rudy?
Well, I tell you what, you know, this is the major problem, guys, and I know we've gone over this many, many times. What is sadly lacking in this particular case is a proper victimology. In other words, who Teresa may have associated with. Now, it's very interesting that at that particular stage, at that particular time, Wisconsin, I believe, was having a very big problem with methamphetamine. Bibi, would that be about correct in 2005?
It still is. It still is. They have commercials, PSA commercials, about things being all messed up here in Wisconsin still to this day.
Yes, yes. There was a huge problem with narcotics, methamphetamine, ice, all sorts of stuff, especially back then. And apparently Sean Rudy was high as a kite on methamphetamines when he killed his wife, pregnant wife, mind you. And, you know, one wonders if narcotics or drugs were somehow involved in the murder of Teresa Horbach. I know that's a bit cheeky for me to say that, but I reckon it is very possible because remember, most of the officers that descended at the Avery salvage yard were mostly from narcotics, which was very, very interesting. So you have both Teresa Horbach, Christine Rudy within a 12-day period in the same area, both die under very brutal and similar circumstances. Because a proper victimology was not done, they didn't check whether there was any form of association with Sean Rudy and what happened to Teresa Horbach. They didn't even ask the question. Bibi, do you have a comment?
I was just going to say how Kratz always preps his witnesses. He's even said so. So I'm sure
correct.
he gave Eisenberg instructions on what she should say, shouldn't say, how to create a perception of something without actually saying it, just like he did with Cherie Cohen. So.
Yep, 100% correct. There's no doubt, in my opinion, that Eisenberg would have been under instructions not to do any further testing on those cremains. They clearly did not want to know whether those cremains at the Manitowoc County Gravel Pit were human. Because don't forget, guys, no bones have been tested. That's important to realize. No bones have been tested. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yeah, Disco Pervert in the chat says she Eisenberg is a double dealer in double standards and being deliberately vague so she can change opinion when needed by the state. And you're so correct on that one.
Yep, 100% correct.
So she wouldn't
I-
commit to anything.
That is 100% correct. And not only that, she actually, I don't know about you guys, but she actually appeared very intimidated and scared on the stand. She was very nervous, very guarded in what she said. This is remarkable because Ken Kratz buttered her up and said she was the smartest woman she knows. And her job, her assigned job, is to determine whether a cremain is human or animal. And in order to do that, there are biochemical tests to determine quite easily from a human bone to an animal bone. But wait for it, all she had to do, all Eisenberg had to do, was actually cut one of the bones and place it under a microscope. Have a look at the structure of the bone within, and you'll be able to tell the difference between human and animal. Unbelievable, she said in her court transcript. No, I didn't test the bones. I didn't want to destroy the bone. With all the hundreds of bone fragments that they had, Eisenberg refused to test the pelvic bone fragments found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Jack 61, do you have a comment?
Isn't it kind of scary though? Think about how much he buttered her up and all of her credentials, and she's so badly misidentified the remains in the Rudy case. Scary to me.
Correct. And it's remarkable that the defense never brought that up. And I'm wondering whether they were actually aware that Eisenberg was the forensic anthropologist in that Sean Rudy case, because really the cases were almost running parallel. The identification of the cremains in the Sean Rudy and Teresa Horbach case were almost running parallel, and it was the same forensic anthropologist. If you read the reports written by Eisenberg on Christine Rudy, you swore you were reading the same reports about Teresa Horbach. It's exactly the same thing, because small crunched bone fragments that were burnt and cut were found in both incidences, which is rather remarkable. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. Number one, how convenient. Number
Yes.
two, how come the defense didn't raise hell over that? Number three.
Well, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, unfortunately, it was Strang that questioned her, and Strang was very much like a gentleman. He didn't want to rock the boat, but you could tell by the questioning he was able to get a lot of information from Eisenberg, which in the end was very, very damaging, right? And it's remarkable that a forensic anthropologist whose job is to determine human versus animal cremains essentially refused to do it. So she
that
said,
was my number 3 point.
Yeah. Yes.
They have an expert who refuses to do examination and who is so vague. So what's the point of being an expert? Because she works for the state. It sounds like, it really, really sounds like she does, or looks like, or seems
Correct.
like she does.
Correct.
Because
Correct.
what is the point of your job, lady, if you're this expert, if you're a forensic anthropologist, and if you refuse to do something with an excuse or whatever it is? Then what kind of expert is that? That's basically just she can do whatever she wants and she can state her opinion. Yet, let's not forget, or let's recall from our clouds of memory, the diagram that they put of the human skeleton. And when she said, "Oh, this bone was found," right?
Yes.
Well, in fact,
yes.
That was again what Bibi said. It was just the illusion of the bones. And when Kratz called this, Karen Halbach's daughter's tibia or the shin bone, it was just a tiny little, maybe 2-inch fragment that was there.
Correct.
But there was an illusion that they found a whole body. And number 4 point is, as you said, the parallels that run between Christine Rudy's case and Teresa Halbach case is that
Yes.
Christine Rudy's trunk was missing. It was thrown in the river, and it was found
That's
much
correct.
later
Her
on.
torso.
And what do we
Yes, her
have
torso.
missing in Teresa's case? Her trunk.
Yes, look, I mean, for the new listeners, you've got to remember that approximately 60% of the skeletal remains are missing. They don't know where they are. And there were no intact bones found, only bone fragments. Now, Eisenberg said that all the cremains, all the bone fragments came from one individual, only one. And the reason why they're able to say that is because they found no duplicate bones, so that they know that when they examine the cremains, they only came from one person, which is very interesting. Yet Eisenberg, in her report, said that some of the bones found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit were in fact human, right? Yet in court, she never mentioned those cremains, right? But the shocking thing was, as a forensic anthropologist paid by the state, she refused to classify the pelvic fragments found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit. Jack 61.
Yeah, Ronald Cass has a question, and this deserves probably a little explanation here. Weren't the bones already cut? So why not use the microscope? So the difference between cut and cut marks. Maybe you should explain that a little.
This is, yes, 100%. This is the irony. This is the irony. And I know this sounds macabre, but the pelvic fragment found at the Manitowoc County gravel pit had already been cut. You're correct, Jack 61. It had already been cut by a sharp, likely by a very sharp blade, right? And you can see the actual internal bone structure. All Eisenberg had to do was place it under a microscope, photograph it, and then apply antibodies to it. So if you apply animal antibodies and human antibodies, you'll be able to determine which antibodies stick to the bones, and you'll be able to determine whether they're human or whether they're from an animal. However, the structure of the bone, when it was cut, is distinctively human. But she refused to say human. She said suspect human. BB.
And that's because if you zoom in on the picture of the cut piece, you can see that honeycomb, which is inside human bones, right?
100% correct. And the outer cortical layer is thin. And you know what's ironical, BB? She actually described exactly what a human bone is like. If you have a look at the pelvic bone fragment in the Manitowoc County gravel pit, it's perfect match of a human bone fragment. Exactly what you expect. A thin cortical layer on the outside, honeycomb pattern on the inside. That's exactly what that pelvic bone fragment looks like. Yet she refused to call it human. Neverly, do you have another comment?
Yes. What you said about Eisenberg's report when she did for the Rudy case, how it's almost word by word or very, very, very similar of the one that she did for Teresa Holbach, doesn't that remind you of Dr. Odontologist Michael West when he in every report said the same thing, indeed and without a doubt,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then
Well,
what happened at the end? He was a fraud.
Yeah, correct. But in a way, it's almost like you're looking at the same case. That's the scary part about it, because the way Christine Rudy was murdered is almost a shadow replica of what happened to Teresa Halbach, right? And we know that Sean Rudy is the one that murdered his wife. And because he was high on meth, Lord knows whether they encountered Teresa Halbach, whether it was a carjacking, you never ever know, because a proper victimology was not done. Jack 61.
Brownie has another question. What bones were found, Was it just limbs and head?
No. If you look at the what Eisenberg did was she classified all the cremains into different body parts. There were representative bones of the entire body from everywhere, but not all the bones were found in one location, right? So, in other words, cranial bone fragments were found in one location, but not in another location. So, there's no question about it that bones were moved, right? Even Eisenberg had to admit that bones were moved. And I remember, I think it was last year, Wizard and I, we were doing the reading. Do you remember Wizard? Do you remember the reading that we did? You played Strang, remember?
I had real trouble keeping my hair on my head. The weather was fucking dreadful, I've got to tell you.
Correct. And this is the bizarre thing, right? Strang even asked Dr. Eisenberg, could any weather event, i.e. a tornado or a typhoon, have moved cremains from the burn pit to Yunda burn barrel number 2 and also in the Manitowoc County? That's correct. That's how stupid it got. And me and Wizard, how many times do we have to do that part of the transcript? 4 or 5 times?
Yeah, again and again. It was fucking ridiculous, really. But yeah, it was good fun.
Yes, but think about it in a court trial. They had to keep a straight face, right?
Well, I mean, we were just trying to sit there. We were just trying to sit there and read it as normal people who kind of are learning all of this for the first time. And you know, it sounds so ridiculous. It's just, I don't know how they've done it. I mean, it's worse than it's as bad as Monty Python. It really is quite ridiculous and absurd.
Correct. Now, does anyone have their YouTube on with volume? I've got YouTube running, but my volume's 0. Has anyone got any YouTube running in the background?
No, mine's off.
All good? We're all good? Yep, mine's off. So it's not me doing any echoing, I hope. Yes. So just to answer that question quickly, there were bone fragments from all over the body, but they were not in all one location. All the bone fragments were small, probably about the size of your thumbnail. Maybe the biggest one was 1 or 2 inches. No intact bones were found, right? 35% of the skull was recovered. The rest of the skull, they don't know where it is. And 60% of the skeletal remains are missing. They don't know where they are. Sammy, do you have a question?
Yeah, while we're on that topic and people are asking questions, let's remind them all that, was it not Kratz that had somebody else's bone barrel brought onto the Avery property?
Oh, that's correct.
Burn barrel, excuse me.
That's correct. There's no doubt that some shenanigans took place with the burn barrels. I can't sort it out in my head. It's too complex. There are burn barrels everywhere. But the likely story is that one of the burn barrels may have been swapped. But again, I know that Bibi, do you remember the name of the lady researcher who
Moving on.
Yes, she spent a huge amount of time.
She says there's 11, 3 years, and she says there's 11 burn barrels.
Right, okay. So it looks like burn barrels may have been swapped. They were off the Avery salvage yard, and Ken Kratz requested them to come back. So it's very, very interesting. Very interesting indeed. And thank you, Bibi. Do you have another comment?
Yeah, just to go back to the tibia for 1 second. Now, this little sliver of tibia where they highlight the whole tibia in the skeleton example, that you said at one point should have been titled a long bone. because you can't really tell if it's from a leg or an arm, correct?
That is correct. Whenever you hear long bone, in fact, if you go to Eisenberg's report, she actually puts long bone, arm, leg. It's because she can't actually tell the difference between a long bone from your arm and a long bone from your leg, because they almost resemble each other, unless you've got the very end of the bone where you've got a knob at the end of the bone, so you can actually determine where it's from, whether it's from the arm or the leg. So she actually puts in her report long bone, arm, leg. So she's not 100% sure where it has come from, because the bones themselves are tiny fragments. They appear to have been crunched, not put through a cremulator like you get at a professional crematorium, but they have been crunched, right? And apparently in the Manitowoc County gravel pit or around the quarries, they've actually got crunching machines that can crunch the rocks into small gravel. And if you look at those cremains, they actually look like small gravel pieces, which is very, very interesting. And Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yes, since we're comparing kind of or mentioning at least the Rudy case, Brownie in the chat had a question, which is big uptake. It would be a big uptake. He says, are there any phone records in the Rudy case that could be compared with the records in the in Teresa's case?
I don't even think they've been checked. I don't believe anyone has drawn any comparison between what happened to Christine and to what happened to Teresa Hallbart. The cases have been treated completely separately. There's no crossover. But you see, if a proper victimology was done and you look at this murder that took place within 12 days of the same window, you definitely would want to have a look at it. I don't believe anyone has. No one has at all.
It would be interesting, but that's a really big job.
Well, how can you have two females within 12 days, shot in the head, cut to pieces, burnt, and parts of their bodies missing? I've never seen that before in my life. Within 12
in the
days,
same geographical area,
in the same geographical location, and no one batted an eyelid.
How
I can't answer that.
convenient, right, baby?
Yeah. But not only that, Neverly, you had Dr. Eisenberg who examined the cremains in both cases, and you would have thought she would have drawn some type of comparison. Thought, there's something going on here. No.
But maybe there's a reason they wanted to keep it on the down low,
Well,
they didn't want to spend 20 seconds on that. Yeah.
Well, it's
how many
because
pages did Kratz spend on the bones in the book?
Actually, it's one of his shortest chapters. It's only about 10 or I think it's about 10 pages. I was actually shocked. The chapter on the bones is probably the smallest one. And you know the reason why? It's because he didn't want to talk about the bones.
Of course.
He did not want to talk. The chapter on the bones is actually one of the shortest in the entire book. He avoided the bones completely. Oh, is anybody on the panel shocked?
No.
No, I'm not shocked at all. But
Redirection.
Yes, correct. Jack 61, do you have a comment?
If he could have got by, I don't think he would have missed him at all. But he knew he had to at least bring him up a little. He had to.
100% correct. 100% correct. Now, what is interesting, guys, if you've ever have the misfortune of reading his book, he actually has a diagram in his book. It's known as Evidence Tag 8318. 8318 is the box of bones, right? Just a box of cremains. And of course, what does BB say? BB, you want to say it about those box?
They came in the box and left in the box.
Yeah, I reckon you're 100% correct. Yet, in his book, he shows a full skeleton and he labels every bone in the skeleton. So when you look at that, you go, oh my God, they must have found the entire Teresa Hallbach in Stephen Avery's burn pit. The reality was they only found bone fragments, and they never found one entire bone. The bones were all crunched. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, in reality, if you took that entire box of bones and stacked them and glued them all together, you wouldn't have enough to make anything more than one leg.
Yes. She actually worked out the amount, the volume, and there's about 60% of the skeletal remains. No one knows where they are. I have a feeling.
I think it's even. Yeah, I think that number's skewed right there.
Yeah, there's something weird going on. But Jack61, do you want to make a comment about where you think the other remains were, or body parts were?
Oh, well, I mean, my personal opinion, there was remains scattered all over the quarry, and I don't know what was at Cuss Road. I think something was there, plus the gravel pit.
Yes, correct. But you don't know whether part of her body has been buried somewhere or disposed of somewhere, or
right.
what was actually found at Cuss Road. Because remember, guys, here's the sequence of events. You have Cuss Road, that was obviously a major crime scene, on the 7th. On the 8th, magically the remains appear in Stephen Avery's gravel pit, in burn pit, the day after. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, they also said, well, like, we're a mile out, we're a mile and a half, we're 2 miles out now, and we're still finding body parts. So did they just stop looking at that point, or did they keep widening it until they were sure they didn't find any more? You know?
Yeah, Bibi, I reckon they stopped looking. I think.
Yeah, well, if they'd have widened it more, maybe they'd have found the rest of her. Maybe she was
100%
spread over,
correct.
or maybe the victim was spread over a 3-mile radius instead of a 2-mile one. You know?
Correct. One does not know. And I know that Shane Henry said, what % of bones did the Hallbach family get? I have a feeling the Hallbach family got all the human bones back. All the ones that the state had, they gave them back.
Well, it said all the believed human bones or something, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So they went through all the bones that they had in containers, and they took out the human bones and they gave them back to the Hallbach family. So
I myself,
yes.
I want to know where that chicken wing bone is at.
Yeah, correct. Look, guys, there's no doubt that Stephen Avery threw food scraps in his burn pit. That's normal, right? They burned food scraps. Remember, they probably gave bones and meat to the dog as well, to bear as well. So it's pretty obvious that there's going to be animal. Plus, they burnt deer heads and other body parts. But I think they did that in the burn barrel. So there would have been animal cremains in the burn pit. So, Bibi, you're correct. They would have found other cremains there as well. And don't you think that's the importance of having a coroner come on the site? Jack 61.
Yeah, thinking about series of events, November 7th was a big day. Clearly, Cuss Road was a crime scene from all appearances. November 8th, bones were found, as you said. November 9th, we have a call into headquarters. Hey, boss, we found a couple of 5-gallon buckets of bones here. We're going to need a bunch of guys. So what did they do? They sent in 60, 80, however many people, state troopers and so forth, that they could get to scour that entire region. So
yeah, huge. I mean, we'll discuss it after, but quite clearly, a lot of attention was placed off the Avery salvage yard. But Ken Kratz made sure that no one asked any questions about the cremains in the Manitowoc County gravel pit. And remember what Ken Kratz said. He didn't want to spend more than 20 seconds on those cremains. And don't worry, I'm going to do a little clip and put that on YouTube as well, because it's so important. It's so important in terms of obfuscation, right? He didn't want anyone asking about those cremains. And I can't believe that a professional like Eisenberg would not classify them as either human or non-human. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Shane Groves says you really don't want a coroner finding planted evidence.
No, correct. That's 100% correct. And we know, look, I know we're being facetious, but we know why the coroner was not called. Because the coroner would have come in and thrown everyone out. She would have brought in her own team of experts, a forensic anthropologist, other experts, completely shut down the crime scene, got everyone out, and would have done a proper, thorough investigation. It would have taken Deborah Kakach 5 seconds to realize that it was a con job, right? She knows what happens when you burn somebody, right? You're not going to get cremains just appearing in a small lump and other cremains scattered all over the place. Clearly, something weird and fishy took place. They wanted to make sure that no one could give an opinion about what they saw in the gravel pit, in the gravel pit, the burn barrel, and also the burn pit. That's why you don't find any in situ photographs. The coroner wasn't called. The whole thing was done really quick, hush hush. And then what do? They bring in bulldozers and they completely demolished the whole burn pit. They removed it so no one could go back and reinvestigate it. Bibi.
Double D says was the same ass clowns investigating Rudy's case.
No, I don't believe they were.
No, it's like 100 miles north from Manitowoc. So
Yes.
it was different police, not
That's
the
correct.
same. Eisenberg was the same.
Eisenberg was the same, yeah, because she obviously was top dog forensic anthropologist at that time, and was called in to investigate the cremains, and she got them wrong. She got them wrong.
Screwed the pooch. Yeah.
Correct. Jack 61.
And also forget the very few police officers that was involved in the Rudy case compared to the hundreds involved in the Halbach case.
There's no
Exactly.
There's no
and
doubt.
she was a pregnant girl, and it was 12 days further into winter when she went missing, and she got practically nothing looked at in her case for how long? Where Teresa, it's far warmer earlier in the year yet, not pregnant, had a good idea of where she'd been for the day, and bam, she got everything under the sun. You know?
Yep, 100% correct, Bibi. There's something, I haven't put my finger on it, but there's something weird going on involving Teresa Halbach that demanded that massive response. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it yet, but there's something weird going on. And the way Ken Kratz reacted when Buting mentioned the phone calls and the voicemail messages, and he threw a tantrum in court, there's something weird going on. There's some weird connection we don't know about yet. Sammy, do you have a question?
Yeah. Let's not forget. They made sure they didn't have to worry about a coroner, didn't they?
Correct. You see, what they did is that they found all the cremains, put them in a box, and the coroner then found out about it on television. So in other words, they had actually gathered up all the cremains, put them in a box. There was nothing for the coroner to see. It was too late.
They commit criminal acts and get away with it because this was criminal. That was absolutely criminal.
That's correct. That's correct. And Deborah Kakach had the power to arrest the sheriff. So she's the top dog. When they find the body, when they find the cremain, the number one person you call is the coroner. Now, Deborah Kakach did not have a conflict of interest because she had nothing to do with Stephen Avery. Yet Manitowoc sheriff officers were all over the place, right? And so the person who had the least amount of conflict of influence was told not to go onto the salvage site. And if she stepped foot on the salvage yard, she was threatened with arrest. And what happened to Deborah Kakach when she tried to testify in court? Norm Gunn got her evicted. BB.
Yeah, I read her in, and it was terrible what they did to her. They pulled the jury, then they pulled her off the stand. Yeah.
Correct.
I wish she would have had the balls to let them arrest her. Man.
Yes, correct. In fact, it's a pity she didn't actually call the bluff and arrest the sheriff.
Yes,
Right.
you're arrested. No, you're arrested. No, you're arrested. No, you're arrested.
Yep,
Yeah.
correct. But you know what? She feared for her life. And within a couple of weeks, she resigned. She just couldn't handle it anymore. It was that bad. All right, guys. Do we have any more comments about our first question? All right. So unfortunately, the best forensic anthropologist in Wisconsin at that time refused to classify cremains and said they were suspect, possible human. Now, let's think about this. I know I carry on about it, but when Dr. Bennett saw the cremains the very first time from the box, he identified an ilium bone, which is part of a pelvis, and he was able to identify that it was human, female, adult. Well, guess what? In the Manitowoc County gravel pit, there were also pelvic bone fragments. So how female pelvis in one location and the other part of her pelvis is in another location a mile away in a gravel pit? That's what Ken Kratz didn't want anyone to discuss, right? How on earth do you separate a pelvis and have them in two completely separate geolocations? The state did not want to address that. All right, guys. So what I'll do, I'll read question number 2. I quote, by reviewing the heavy charring of the bone material and the extent to which those bones were mutilated through mechanical chopping and breaking, she determined that they were cut and burned in an obvious attempt to thought detection and identification. Several tools, including a hammer, a hoe, a rake, and a shovel, were found in and around the Avery burn pit. Whoever did it didn't want this young woman found. Here's the question. Were any of the tools found around the burn pit, were they tested and implicated to be involved in the dismemberment of the body? Who would like to answer that question? Jack 61.
I think, thinking back now, the rake, I think it was the rake, it did have some, what you would say, in, charring. But as far as actual identification, I don't think so.
Correct. I don't recall any of the implements are being tested to see whether they had bone on it, blood on it, tissue on it. Nothing. But you see what Jack 61, you see what Ken Kratz was trying to implicate here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. What was he trying to imply, Jack 61?
Well, he had her out there and he got everything in his little fire pit, and he just chopped and broke bone apart and did all this other bunch of stuff. But
Correct.
there's one thing he didn't mention, Doc, is the hacksaw blade that started it was on trail to look for and locate. Because
And they
of
left
the,
it.
yeah,
They left it. They actually
Yeah.
left the hacksaw blade because I think it was Erdl who said, "Oh yeah, we were in a hurry. It was getting dark, and we just left it." So you would think at the very least they would get the hacksaw blade and just test it, right? But clearly none of those implements have been tested. There's only one problem with that theory, and that is the bones actually show cut marks on them, right, with a sharp knife or a sharp instrument. And some of the bones have got kerf saw marks in them. And Kathleen Zellner's expert demonstrated some of the bones had hesitation cuts, which meant that someone started cutting the bone and then stopped, right? So none of that is going to occur with the instruments. You're not going to get that happening with a hammer, a hoe, a rake, or a shovel. You need blades, sharp knives to cut bone like that, right? Even an electrical bandsaw would do it. None of that was tested to show that those instruments that Ken Kratz was saying, oh, yeah, he tended the fire and he chopped up the bones. None of that was actually proven. You needed sharp, in actual fact, I hate to say it, but all the instruments in a deer dressing kit is exactly what you need to cut up a body in the manner it was found, right? So the bones, the cremains, had actual saw marks in them. He meant one was Teresa Halbach. The victim was dismembered. Now, did Brendan Dassey actually say they dismembered Teresa Halbach? Does anyone remember? Did he actually say that? Checking convictions.
Absolutely not. He said whole body.
Correct. In actual fact, he drew it. He drew a whole body being placed in the burn pit. Sorry,
Yeah,
checking convictions.
He didn't say whole body. Actually, he said toe, they said foot, he said forehead, they said head. So, yeah, but he never mentioned anything about it. He said body.
Correct. A whole body. So, in other words, even Brendan had no idea what had happened to Teresa Halbach. But fear not, guys. The victim, in this case, I believe it was Teresa Halbach, she was dismembered. And so if you cut up a body into smaller fragments, it's easier to cremate, it's easier to burn, right? But the problem with the burn pit is that you can't get it hot enough. You have to put in a huge amount of fuel and time to convert a human body into bone fragments. The burn pit was an open, small, shallow burn pit. You can't burn a human body to bone fragments. Okay, it doesn't get hot enough. All right, so here's the crazy thing. None of the tools were tested, right? They found no evidence to demonstrate that Teresa Halbach was dismembered with those implements. And also, the investigators took all the knives in I think in Stephen's trailer and elsewhere. They tested them all. They didn't find any blood or any of Teresa Halbach's DNA in any of them. So they had no way to prove that Stephen or Brendan had dismembered Teresa Halbach. They couldn't prove it. Guys, has anyone got any other comments? Neverly.
Disco Pervert said, not Disco, I'm sorry, Dark Side of the Moon earlier on in the chat said, so you go out of your way to destroy the body, to crush the bones, yet you leave the whole car so visibly on the
Correct.
salvage yard. Yes.
That's
point.
100% correct. Yep, correct. And of course, the other ridiculous scenario is the mere fact that bones were definitely moved. Cremains were definitely moved. because they're not found in one location. They're found in multiple locations, which goes to show that if it was Stephen Avery who moved these cremains, why not gather them all up, put them in a bucket and bury them somewhere, throw them in a river? Why are you going to leave some cremains in your own burn pit, some in your sister's burn barrel, and then go all the way in the Manitowoc County gravel pit and put them in 4 different piles? It made no sense. That's why Ken Kratz did not want to talk about the Manitowoc County gravel pit, because it just became more ridiculous, right? So, guys, does anyone have any additional comments on that one?
A lot
Sammy.
of conversations going on about in the chat about dismembering the body and whether to use a saw or not a saw and whether it was or wasn't used. But I'm going to tell you right now, if someone is a skilled hunter, which many people out there were, it wouldn't be
Yes,
difficult with a sharp enough knife, a good knife set, to dismember anything in no time.
correct. Correct. And you know, the real scary thing is, have you seen that picture of the deer hanging up in Bobby Dassey's garage, all dismembered and hanging up, right?
I
What
have
is
seen a
in,
lot.
yeah. What, you know what's interesting? The way the investigators, Fassbender and Wiegert, asked Brendan Dassey, did you use the ropes in the garage? Now, isn't that interesting? Right? Because they
Right.
were trying to fish whether they hung up Teresa Horbuck and cut her to pieces like dressing down a deer. Right? And of course, they found no evidence of that occurring in Stephen Avery's garage at all. But isn't it interesting that they were thinking that? Sammy,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
right? And if you have a look at the videos, they actually show the rafters with the rope. Isn't that interesting? Jack 61.
I was just going to mention exactly what you just said. And there was an argument in pretrial between the defense and the state, including this animation from Trooper Steve, Steve, what was his name?
Trooper Reese?
Anyway, whichever one it was, I'm not sure if it was Reese that prepared the video, the animation. I don't think it was Reese, but it was one of the state troopers that worked for
Yes,
that
you're correct.
unit.
It was one of the state troopers, yes.
Yeah, and they argued about how that would appear to the jury, having those ropes kind of hanging from the rafters, and he wanted to include it because
Yes.
it was I think he he wanted to get that in as an implication, but they had no proof of that. And I think that in the end they
No.
finally agreed that they would remove it.
Yes, correct. But if you see the videos, they actually showed the ropes on the rafters, right? And the reason why I mention that is because that's exactly what Ed Gein in Wisconsin did to one of his victims, right? Hung upside down and basically dismembered, hanging from the rafters. And he too was a hunter, right? So I think they were trying to implicate that Brendan and Stephen did exactly the same thing. Sammy.
Yes. This is a conversation I think we're going to have to stop for just a second to have. I'm an ex meat cutter. I was a meat cutter for many years. And I'm going to tell you this right now. If you have the right set of tools, and I'm talking about good knives, and you have to cut meat, it's easy to debone it, dismember any animal that you come, way back in the day, we used to still get half an animal. And
Yes.
it is no task whatsoever with an experienced person,
Yes.
especially if you're a hunter and you're used to doing this. Once you've done one, you can do them all. Okay. It would take someone with that skill to do such a thing. But because I know what a mess it would make, I find it very difficult to believe that this ever took place over at Stephen Avery's or anywhere on that property. I understand people think, well, that would be such a if you don't have that skill, you're not a hunter, you don't know what you're doing.
Correct.
Absolutely, it would be a difficult task for anyone. But if you
Correct.
have and you have the right set of knives or equipment, this is going to be easy peasy for just about anybody who is experienced with this.
Correct. Correct. And I know it's macabre, but we need to talk about it because a human body's got, I think, about 12 to 14 liters of blood. That's a huge amount of blood, right? Where is the blood? Where is the blood, right? I mean, butchering an animal, Sammy, you have to agree, it's a messy, messy thing unless you know what you're doing. You
Oh
remove
yeah,
the blood, you
some
drain the
pieces when
blood. Correct.
you get the animals in, like the half a carcass, a quarter of a carcass, way back in the day, it
Yes,
was already basically bled out, and it still made a mess. Oh yeah,
correct.
I can't
Correct.
imagine. I can't imagine. Yeah.
Correct. 100% correct. And thank you, Sammy. And Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, guys. However, there's a human factor in all of this. Dismembering an animal and a human body may be a little bit different on a mental level. So I just
Yeah.
don't know. It takes a special person to do this job, really a special person. So I know you're used to like hunters are used to blood and body parts and whatever, but a deer is a deer, but a girl is a girl. So
Correct.
I
And
believe that
remember, Brendan Dassey. Yeah. Remember, Brendan Dassey said he faints at the sight of blood. Oh, well, what
yes.
about a full body dismemberment? Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that would have
Yes.
been traumatizing? He went
Yeah.
to school the next day as though nothing happened. And guess what?
Yeah.
Nothing did happen.
And
That's
I'm a nurse and I've seen stuff in the operating room and whatever, everything is under control and it still grows people, let alone um, dismembering somebody. And when you have a patient on the table draped with drapes and you have just an opening where you're operating on, putting the
yes,
scope
yes,
in or taking something out, that's one story. But when you have a human, whether naked in clothing, it doesn't matter, with a head blown off or whatever, it's a very different
yes.
game. Yeah.
Correct,
So
correct.
whoever did it,
It
God, we're talking about a
was
special
gruesome.
kind of animal. Yes.
And that's exactly what Sean Rudy did to his wife, pregnant wife, right? Shot her in the head, cut her up, burnt her to pieces,
Mm-hmm.
and threw her torso away. So
Yeah.
he capable of doing something like that to a fellow human being. That's scary.
Yes.
Even
Yeah.
Avery and Brendan,
Evil and
no
on meth.
way.
Yes. Correct.
Correct, correct. BB, do you have a comment?
And not to mention, if this supposedly took place in the trailer or the garage, not one molecule of her blood was found anywhere, not one piece of splatter, nothing.
That's correct.
Yeah. The
That's
whole
correct.
trunk was everything, all the innards, where the intestines. We have like, I don't know, 30 feet of intestines or
I'm
whatnot.
also hearing
Where are those?
I'm also hearing here in the text, in the chat, that Stephen Avery had issues with blood as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, you gotta. People have to understand the brutality of the crime, right? And that's what Ken Kratz doesn't really want to talk about. It's not a mere shooting and leaving a body on the side of the road or dumping a body. This is actually this is going extreme, extreme violence. Dismemberment, cremation, the full yards, right? This is not just simply shooting somebody and dumping their body. This is to make sure that no one finds the person. And yet Stephen Avery allegedly left all the clues everywhere. Something is not right here, guys. It's not right. Okay, so to answer that question, no, they didn't test any of the tools, and they obviously found nothing that pointed to those tools being used to dismember the bones. Now, here's the interesting thing, guys. Was Stephen Avery convicted of mutilation of a corpse?
No, right?
No,
No, he was
he
not.
wasn't.
No.
He was
Mm-mm.
not. Who was convicted
Freaking
of
Brandon.
Brendan Dassey was convicted of mutilation of a corpse, and he's the one that faints at the sight of his own blood. So how on earth could the jury find him guilty of sexual assault? No proof. Guilty of mutilation of a corpse? No proof. And guilty of first-degree murder? No proof. No forensic evidence that ties him to Teresa Halbach. How did that checking convictions tell us? How did it happen?
They talked to him, interviewed him, lied to him, told him they were his buddy and he was their son and all that good stuff, and made him say things that just were. Oh, you know what bothers me the most is when he told the truth, they told him he was lying. When he
Correct.
lied, they told him he was doing a good thing. You know,
Correct.
that is really a mind trip for a 16-year-old kid, especially with language difficulties. So they just took advantage of him, and I don't understand why, how they could convict him on rape or mutilation of a body if they didn't use any, forensics in his case, just words.
Yeah. Correct. A disaster. So, it still does my head in how Brendan Dassey got convicted of anything based on words and no forensic evidence. All right. So, guys, we'll continue with our questions. I quote, this is question number 3 coming up. Against all odds, one femur bone that Eisenberg examined still had muscle tissue attached. Somehow, the intense heat hadn't incinerated it. DNA expert Cherie Cohane was able to conclude that the tissue belonged to Teresa. Right, here's the question. What are the issues with this statement? Who would like to answer it?
I have been. Ooh, me.
BB, go for it.
I call bullshit. Okay? There is no way you can have it both ways, that the bones are so charred that merely touching them can break them into dust, that you can't get any DNA out of them. But yet, there's still one teeny little piece of meat that has survived. It's impossible.
Yep.
And
That's
where's
what
the
they're
picture?
saying.
And where is a picture of this?
Well, they said they took a picture of item BZ, and apparently there's some charred muscle tissue connected to it.
Where's the
That's what they
picture?
said.
Show
That's what
me
they
the
said.
picture. Yeah.
That's what they
No,
said, BB.
I call bullshit.
Okay. I respect that. I appreciate that. Jack 61. Thank you, BB. Jack 61.
I think that if she did collect something, whatever, she flummoxed the numbers because I'm no scientist. You're the scientist, and others have spoken. 7 loci in today's, well, even in that time frame, was a really low threshold to say that is this person here. Even though I know that listen to you, and we all carry similar genetic markers. I get that, but to me, it wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. I think she flummoxed the numbers too. And one last thing, talking about this amplification process that they do. Didn't Sherry amplify the hell out of what she did have? And doesn't that distort your findings? I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, you can get into a lot of trouble, Jack 61, when you have a low amount of DNA. The PCR technique, polymerase chain reaction technique, is a very, very sensitive. It's also very sensitive to contaminants, right? Here's the problem. The muscle tissue that they isolated from the bone was heavily charred. So what Cherie Culhane did was try and isolate genomic DNA from that charred muscle tissue. The problem with doing that is that the DNA itself was heavily fragmented, right? Because it was exposed to heat. So therefore, when she did the PCR analysis, instead of all 15 loci coming up, only 7 came up because the DNA was so badly fragmented. She was able to get a 7 out of 15 match to the Pap smear. So, but it's more than just 7 loci. It's 14 alleles, right? Because each loci has 2 alleles. So there were 7 loci, 14 alleles that matched. Plus the sample was from a female. So it all tended to suggest that the DNA that was amplified up did indeed come from Teresa Hallbach. I understand what BB's saying. In a quarter or 7 loci is not enough. Now you need 20. So here's the kicker. Had the state preserved those tissue and bones through the new rapid DNA testing procedures, you can now retest those samples. And hopefully, with more sensitive techniques, you'll be able to get a full genomic DNA profile and conclusively prove that the cremains belong to Teresa Hallbach. Unfortunately, because only 7 loci came up, there's always going to be a bit of conjecture and controversy, and I fully understand where BB's coming from. But for me, from a molecular point of view, if the Pap smear did belong to Teresa Hallbach, then I would dare say she's dead. I have no problems about that, because the other thing is the FBI did mitochondrial DNA testing as well, and the mitochondria matched the mother, Karen Hallbach. She could not be excluded. So all the molecular evidence tended to point to the person who was cremated, murdered, was Teresa Hallbach, right? And if you look at the skeletal remains are from a female, and they're from someone of the age bracket of Teresa Hallbach. So it tends to be suggestive that the victim is Teresa Hallbach, and I fully respect Bibi, what she says, because you really need retesting of those cremains. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Well, and the mitochondrial DNA, the mother, Karen Hallbach, is supposed to have that double, what's it?
Correct. She's heteroplasmy. She's got
So
2
that
different
means
pools of
2
mitochondria.
different. And the
2
piece
different
they
pools,
found
correct.
of supposed meat, it only had 1.
Correct. It only had the 1 type, but that can happen, BB, because what happens is that mitochondria, you inherit your mitochondria from your mother. 99.99% of mitochondria come from your mum. Some rare cases, the sperm contributes some mitochondria,
Right, the tail.
Yes,
Yeah.
but very, very rarely. The mere fact that they couldn't exclude Teresa Hallbach from the mitochondrial DNA testing is highly suggestive that mitochondria is indeed from Teresa Hallbach. But you really need a good DNA sample for proper testing. 100% agree, BB. Checking convictions. Thank you, BB. Checking convictions.
Yes, Ronald Cass says, could someone rig a DNA test to intentionally produce a low result?
No, not really, because the testing is all done by machine. So Cherie Culhane essentially sets up the test, and it's all placed inside a machine, and it's all done by computer. The computer actually does the analysis. So you can't actually rig the answer because it's all on the computer's hard drive. You get the result and it spits out the result. So that's a hard record. It's not like the good old days you can fudge a gel result. No, this is all done by machine. So The new machines, the rapid DNA testing machines, you don't even touch the sample. You put it in a tube, you put it in a machine, and it does the whole lot. And it then will give you an answer. So that's why the DNA needed to be re-extracted. The bones needed to be retested using the rapid DNA methodology. It's much more sensitive. Unfortunately, that was not done. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. I also have a very, very hard time swallowing that idea that the bones were Teresa's. I believe what you're saying, and I'm going with it. However, let remember, was it Remaker or Dietering who talked to Karen Holbach and said, "Did you have any female
Yes.
relatives?" Remember
Yeah.
that? Why in the world
Other
would they
missing person.
ask her that? Because
Well, I
they knew
suppose,
that 7 loci,
yes.
and just because she's I was gonna say the F word, just because she's a female, and they cannot exclude her. Can they actually say that that's her? They cannot.
Okay.
Otherwise, they would say this is Teresa 100%. Am I seeing
Okay.
this correctly or
Okay.
not?
Well, I'll explain it to you, right? Now, I did my PhD in this field, right? Using diagnostic tools to look at families and pedigree analysis. We did family analysis. We used the same type of probes, DNA probes, except we didn't use PCR. We used another method back then. But the way it's worked out is through statistics, right? Through statistics. These molecular markers, we all have the same loci, but we have different alleles. We are all different to one another. So if one looked at the statistics, I'll tell you this. It's a 1 in a billion chance of not being Teresa Halbach. 1 in a billion. So that's by statistics. So in other words, in 2005, there were 7 people on the planet that had exactly the same 7 alleles, 7 loci, that had that particular genotype at those loci. 7
Well,
in the entire planet. And one of them happened to be missing in Wisconsin. What's the chance of that?
I know, but one also died very shortly of an apparent alleged overdose. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all. I totally agree with you, Dr. Silkman, on this one. However, you said it yourself. If the pap smear is Teresa's indeed, if that's
Correct.
a humongous if.
Correct.
So we're
Correct.
talking about a mountain of suspicion. You know what I mean? I'm just going to
Correct.
say it and call it a suspicion because they had a gentleman's agreement. Okay, let's shake hands. We're not going to question this one. Really.
Correct. If you didn't,
and if that was my daughter, I would never be satisfied with the results. I would never accept that that's my daughter. I would still be looking for my daughter. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm stupid or something, but I'm just saying.
No. Yeah, I agree. But
because of that gentleman's agreement, I don't believe anything.
Yes, I realize that, but I'm approaching this from a scientific point of view. That's my background. Right, I'm taking the emotions right out. I'm taking the emotions right out. I'm looking at this from a scientific point of view. If the pap smear is from Teresa Halbach, now think about this. That pap smear was obtained from a hospital with records, and Karen Halbach had to sign a release form to get the pap smear released from the hospital. We know that the pap smears are kept for 5 years. Now, I know that Bibi, and I know that another researcher by the name of Robert Ducky actually phoned the hospital and found that out. We actually found the book that the hospital uses, and back then, the pap smears were kept for 5 years, right? So that's what actually happened. That was part of the official record. The pap smears were kept for 5 years. The only thing was there were reports that were with the pap smears. None of the reports have been put forward and published and put in court. No one questioned the authenticity of those pap smears.
Let me ask you a question.
Conveniently.
I rest my case right there.
Conveniently.
Okay.
I rest my
Okay.
case.
Okay. Sammy, do you have a question?
Okay, so then, and I have a great respect for your degree. I believe everything you say. But is it not possible that someone could have had someone else deceased used that individual's pap that they took on spot and DNA swabs that they took and said, oh, this is now TH, and used that?
Look, there's one problem. No, actually, there's more than one problem. And the problem is the RAV4, because the RAV4 contains blood, saliva, and touch
Yep, from the
DNA.
said person that I just mentioned.
So you need if you're gonna do it, you need blood from the person, you need saliva from the person, you need touch DNA from the person, and you need mitochondrial DNA from the mother, a surrogate mother. So if
All
you
of those things are possible in this scenario.
look,
Okay.
I'm not.
How about a surrogate
just-
mother or a surrogate grandmother?
Yeah, how about that?
I'm just saying. How far down the rabbit hole do you want to go, guys?
I've been
Well,
all the way to
as
the bottom, so we're okay.
Yeah, as
just
Shane Grove says, we already know most of the planted evidence. How far did they go? Are they willing to go? They
Yes.
had a mission.
Well,
You have to agree with
they-
that.
That's
they
what I
did it.
always say. If you can picture them planting the raft and picture them planting the key and planting the bullet, and
the
planting
bones.
Steve's blood and planting the bones, why can't you imagine them planting a victim?
Well, look, I can't discount that. Only on the proviso, if you're going to do it, you need cremains, you need blood, you need saliva, you need touch DNA, and you need a surrogate mother to give a sample. That's huge.
Well, you could get almost all of it during an autopsy when you're making a DNA card.
Well,
When you're making a DNA card on the autopsy.
right, BB? Yeah.
Yep. Well,
Exactly.
I'm telling you, I present it as I receive the information. That's why the bones need to be tested again, because no bones have been tested. So you need to do a DNA extraction of the cremains and prove them once and for all they belong to Teresa Hobart. Guys, do you agree?
Too bad we don't have the bones to do that with anymore.
That's correct. That's
I mean,
correct.
there were
That
52
is the
guys that
problem.
did nothing.
That's
You know,
the problem.
they were willing to go that far. So
That-
obviously they were
that's the
very
problem.
invested in this.
Yep, that
We're not
that is the
arguing
problem.
with you, Dr. Silkman.
No,
We're just saying that
no,
it's
no.
possible. Yeah.
Really, I'm presenting it from a scientific point of view as
Yeah.
I see it. I honestly believe that evidence was planted against Stephen Avery, but to then go on top of that and plant a victim, whew, that's huge. That is huge. One slip up, and the game is gone. And you're going to have most of the MTSO in prison, including Fassbender, because Fassbender is the one that got the pap smear. That means
Absolutely not. I don't agree with you there. I'm sorry. I have to say it. They're getting away with fucking murder. Oh, I just did it.
look, anything's possible, guys. I'm just presenting it as I see it. But this case is pretty weird. But if you're going to fake a victim, you need a lot of different components to go your way. One false component and the whole thing falls apart. So you're risking everything by planting a fake victim. That's all I'm saying. But yep, that's a discussion
And
for
the
another
fake
day.
key, and the fake bullet, and the
Everything.
fake.
Everything.
Yeah. Are you going to prison
lick
already?
DNA. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything. Correct. Checking convictions. Do you have a comment?
Yeah,
Chasing
I
questions.
just,
That's all.
I want to just kind of go back to the pap smear, and
Yes.
let's just think of this. I think logically, this to me is logic. They're trying to prove this is Teresa, so why would they use somebody else's in case of further testing? They wanted to get Stephen Avery for Teresa Hallbuck, so I don't believe that that intimate sample or whatever it is they call it was faked. I do believe that was from Teresa. So, because they were trying to prove it was her. They weren't trying, you know what I mean? I don't,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. But look, I can see the other side of the coin.
I
Like
can too.
pl-
But
planting forensic evidence against Stephen Avery is risky, but it's easy to do. Planting a fake victim is
that's what I mean.
extremely hard to do because now you've got multiple variables. You've got planted evidence to point to Stephen, and now you've got a fake victim.
That's what I
Oof.
mean. They were trying to
That's
prove
off
it was
the
her.
charts.
So,
That's
yeah,
off the charts. But
that's right.
it can, is it possible? Anything is
Yes.
possible, guys.
Yeah.
Anything is
Just
possible.
basically.
All right. So the way I summarize it is this. You really need to prove that those cremains come from Teresa Hallbuck. Guys, would you agree?
Yes, like I said, they're trying to prove it's her.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in other words, you retest the bones to prove that they actually belong to Teresa Hallbuck. But here's the kicker. You need a DNA standard from Teresa Hallbuck. The only DNA standard that they used was the pap smear. There was a report that comes with the pap smear. We all need to see that report. Guys, would you agree?
There should be 3 reports, right?
That is correct. We need to see what the report actually said.
And,
Sounds like a
and
FOIA.
if it was hers, why don't they just put that in court? Why did they have to make a gentleman's
That is
agreement
that's
that they're
100%.
agreeing that it's hers?
Wait,
Yep, 100% agree.
wait. That has to be in court. They made that was a stipulation.
Silkman, I want to
Yes.
make a point here.
Yes.
They have, like a Magnolia Studio Design has said, they also made every attempt to absolutely remove Teresa Hallbeck's DNA. So you cannot go back and retest.
Yes,
Correct.
I was just gonna say that.
Correct.
With
Correct.
everything that we said so far, they made sure that the
Correct.
item FL was not usable anymore. They returned the
key.
bones, right?
Yes.
The key.
Yes.
So, excuse me, they knew what they were doing. That's why it's like,
Yes.
okay, we're going to get rid of the bones and then we're going to suffer the consequences. So, once
Yes.
the bones are done, even if they get in trouble, we cannot retest the bones.
Correct. And what surprises me is you would want to, if you're the state, if you're the mother, if you're the family, you want 100% conclusive proof that that is your daughter. Guys, do you agree?
Yes, absolutely.
So
yes.
why wouldn't the state keep the best bones to say we'll keep this and we'll get it tested and we'll prove that the victim is Teresa Hallbuck?
And instead, they get rid of them. So
that's what I
it's like,
can't
hello.
understand.
Yes.
That's what I can't understand. They're preventing Kathleen Zuna from actually testing the cremains.
So we have a question here. Wardy does said, do we know what happened to the blonde hair hanging from the vent in the rat?
No,
Did that have root? And was it collected and tested? And that's exactly what I
no,
wanted to know, but I
no,
wasn't for sure.
no, no. The only thing of Teresa Hallbach, like I said, if you believe it, is the blood, the saliva, and the touch DNA on the inner door handle. I don't think they found fingerprints. Anyway, they wouldn't have Teresa Hallbach's fingerprints. But they did take a lot of items from her bedroom, which potentially they could extract DNA from, right? Whether they've done that, I do not know. But remember, guys, if they never had the pap smear, there wouldn't be a case because they don't have a standard of Teresa Hallbach. They can't actually prove it's Teresa Hallbach. In actual fact, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they also used the pap smear for Christine Rudy. I think they did as well.
They did.
Same thing. Yep, exactly the same thing. They needed a DNA standard from the victim. So if the pap smear is from Teresa Hallbach, you must accept she's dead. You must accept she's dead. From a molecular point of view, she's dead. It's a 1 in a billion chance that she's not dead. 1 in a billion, right? And like I said,
I believe she is dead.
Statistically, 7 people on the planet in 2005 had that profile. One of them was from Wisconsin and is missing, right? But I understand what the problem is. You got to prove those cremains are, you need a 20 out of 20 loci match with the pap smear, right? If you do, then it's got to be Teresa Hallbach. No question about it. It can't be anybody else. But the way the investigation went, they left the door open. Neverly.
My personal opinion is that Teresa is dead. However, I see the other side that people that think that she's alive. I can see why, because of that door that they left open. The problem that I have with all of this and why am I, voicing my opinions about the, intimate sample. What intimate sample? Why don't you just call it what it is? Pap smear, if it is.
Yeah.
And if
Yes.
it's Teresa's, that they didn't prove in court that those bones belong to her, that's Teresa. Because
Yes.
Eisenberg also received a bunch of bones in a box, took 3 days, to come back from a weekend or whatever, to look at them, refused to put them under the microscope. In other words, he refused to do the necessary standard testing. And what was the name, if we can remember? It's really not important what his name is. Kathleen Zellner's expert who said that Eisenberg did a subpar job in this.
Yeah.
He totally blasted her. Signs.
Yes.
He was appalled the way she did it. So you see what I'm saying? Majority of people think that they did not prove that those bones or DNA belong to Teresa. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Dr. Symes tore strips from Eisenberg, and he was 100% correct. I did a presentation on that, and it was shocking.
You did.
It was shocking.
Yeah.
It's
one thing to say that she is dead, and by court of law in California, if you're missing for 2 years, you are pronounced dead.
Right.
2 years. That's it.
Bones or not.
There's one thing the legal, one thing in court. Just like, well, we know that Stephen and Brenda are innocent, but we cannot prove it before we go to the court, and they're stopping that. Well, for the state, they needed to prove that that was Teresa, whether that was or not Teresa's bones. Whether they were or not, doesn't matter. They needed proof, and they had subpar again.
Correct.
Proof that was Teresa. That's all I'm saying.
So here's the issue. Ken Kratz could not say definitively those cremains were from Teresa Hallbach.
Yes.
It wasn't 100%.
Yeah.
It wasn't 100% certainty.
Correct. And as much as he's tooting his horn and the pools of blood, and he's gonna, now we know what happened, and now this, he knows nothing. He created an illusion, and
Correct.
and he ran with it. It's a story,
Correct.
and they proved
I,
as much. Lukewarm.
I agree. Bibi, do you have a comment?
Yes. When you did a project on the intimate Santa, I believe we used a clip from Laura Heck, where she had called a radio station and talked to Kratz about the gentleman's agreement.
Oh,
and he kind
yes,
of goes
yes,
off.
yes.
Yes, and he says that the gentleman's agreement is about the vibrator.
The vibrator, that's correct. Correct. And no one even mentioned the vibrator. No one had ever mentioned that. No,
And he
he's
went
crazy.
off saying, how dare, well, Zellner brought up the vibrator. And he says, how
Yes.
dare Zellner bring it up and not honor the gentleman's agreement? And
Correct.
he went off having a fit over Zellner
That's
about
correct.
the vibrator.
That's 100% correct. Yeah.
So that
But
would
this-
be maybe why you wouldn't have paperwork on a pap smear. Also.
I tell you what, if I was Kathleen Zellner, I would demand to have a look at that paperwork, and I would retest the pap smear, re-isolate the genomic DNA, redo all the testing. 100% agree.
Guys,
do you have a comment? Oh, sorry, Jack 61.
I just wanted to add in, I'm sure there's paperwork, and I'm sure there was a stipulation on the pap smear. I'm sure of it. I'll find it.
Yes. There actually is I think it's a DCI document that talks about the fact that there were 3 reports that came with the pap smears. They only presented the pap smears, but not the reports. But there are meant to be reports. And they obviously kept them private. They didn't want what was in the reports to be released, which was very interesting indeed. Right? There are no reports. We haven't seen them. Alice, do you have a comment?
It's a comment from Shane Groves. He says, "We'd all make a terrible jury. It would take us years to deliberate."
That's true. That's true. But you see, here's the issue, right? My background is molecular biology, right? So I see it as black and white, but there's also a lot of grey in between, right? Because you guys and also our audience have come up with some excellent points, and they're very hard to argue, right? But I see it from a scientific point of view, and just recall what is known. Can that stuff be dubious? Can it be faked? You bet it can. But I report what has been presented and the facts of what has been presented. Sammy, do you have a comment?
KK said it was all about perception, right?
Correct.
Perceive this then. There was a gentleman's agreement on paper, whatever it might have pertained to, who knows for sure. They used it in court to mention this wasn't about not questioning where this stuff came from.
That's correct. That's correct. Yep, 100% agree. If you don't have that's why they took buccal swabs of everyone, because you need a standard. You need a DNA standard. You can't have a murder case if you don't have a DNA standard to prove who's been murdered. So they needed a standard, and they got it through the pap smear. Now, for some bizarre unknown reason, they didn't present the reports. Had they presented the reports, everyone would have said, yep, I agree. That's Teresa Horbach. That's her pap smear. That's her DNA. End of story. But because of the way the investigation was done, they've left the door open to criticism, and the state deserves all the criticism it's getting. I agree, 100%. Well, look, guys, I am conscious of the time. I want to do one more question. Guys, are we happy with that? And we can continue this next week. At least we did more than one question, right, Bibi?
Yeah, but it did take
At
an
least we
hour
did-
for that first question.
That is correct. That's correct. But we got a lot. We got a. Hey, remember we did a presentation and we did one slide, and
One
I had 20
slide,
of them.
yeah, yeah, one slide.
We did one slide, so we're not doing too bad. At least we're on question number 4. So, guys,
Right.
correct. We're doing very well. So, guys, our last question for tonight. This one's a good one. This one's a ripper. I quote: Leslie Eisenberg also examined 2 skull fragments. They told another macabre story. Before Teresa's body was burned, Leslie found Teresa was shot in the head, once in the parietal region near the left temple, and once in the occipital region, the back of the skull. Each skull fragment had a defect, with the skull material itself beveled, creating the unmistakable sign of a bullet entry wound. With the assistance of State Crime Lab element specialist Ken Olson, the skull fragments were x-rayed using highly sensitive mammography film. Tiny particles of lead were detected, particles left behind by a bullet entering the victim's skull. Cause of death, homicidal violence. Manner of death, gunshot. Here's the question. Listen carefully. Why didn't the state connect the lead fragments in the cranial bone fragments to the bullet fragment item FL?
Would
Who
have
would
been
like to
their
answer?
undoing. It would
Who
have
would
been
like-
their undoing.
Yes.
It would
Potentially
have been
that could have been their undoing.
Yep.
Yeah. Neverly.
First of all, it sounds like an execution style killing.
Yes, it does.
And
Yes.
then they didn't do that probably because it wouldn't match,
That's correct.
bullet. right?
That's correct. That's correct. If it didn't match, that's the end of their case, because it would have
Yep.
proven that item FL didn't cause the cranial bone fragments. In actual fact, we now know that item FL never went through skull. But imagine if they presented that data in 2007 to say we can't connect the cranial bone fragments to item FL. There goes their case. Checking Thank you, Neverly. Checking conviction.
Because they never found the true bullets that went through her skull.
That's correct.
A 22, it doesn't have the velocity to do that, as far as we know. So I just think it was because they didn't have the right thing. The bullet that went through the Little Red Riding Hood lawn ornament that they shot at is not the one that went through her head.
Correct. Jack 61.
If you don't want to know the answer to a question, don't ask it.
Yeah, but don't you think it's rather nefarious of them? They wanted to know about the EDTA, but they didn't want to test the cranial bone fragments lead with the lead of item FL.
That's right.
Don't you find that rather suspicious?
It's very weird.
Right. They had the FBI, they've got an elemental chemist. All they had to do was do an elemental analysis of the cranial bone fragments and the lead of the bullet and check the composition, see if they matched, right? They didn't do it. Guys, anybody else got any comments?
No, just that
Phoebe.
those little pieces of lead, those are what they referred to as radiopaque.
Radio opaque, correct.
Yep.
So what happens is when you get shot in the skull by a high velocity bullet, you get an entrance wound and it causes a beveling. So on the outside of the skull, the hole is smaller than on the inside of the skull. You get a bevel. So what happens is as the bullet transits through the skull plate, it flies open, it cracks open on the inside, it bursts open. So it forms a crater, a bevel. So the hole on the outside is smaller than the hole on the inside, right? The trouble is, a lot of the skull was missing. They found no exit wounds at all, only 2 entrance wounds. Bibi.
Well, and besides making that crater, the lead splatters like a
Correct.
micro spray inside, and then it embeds, and that's what they call the radiopaque, the little
Correct.
pieces of lead
It's embedded in bone.
that are left
It's embedded
behind
in bone.
besides the beveling.
Correct. Correct. So what happens is when a bullet transits through skull, it actually leaves its part of its outer coat in the bone. It's entrapped in the bone as tiny little flecks, right? And they're radiopaque. The X-ray doesn't go through it, and you see it as a tiny little particle, and it's quite bright. So that's diagnostic of a bullet strike, right? But the question is a .22 bullet, has it got enough velocity to cause that type of beveling in bone? Jack 61.
You know, just watching these various crime shows and so forth. I'm talking about the real ones. Doesn't it
Yes.
make sense? Doesn't it make sense that if there was these radiopaque particles in the skull bone, that whoever fired whatever weapon had to be relatively close to the
Very
skull?
close. Very
Or
close.
wouldn't there be a real chance of blowback?
Oh, no question about it. And that's exactly what Buting asked Cohane. Said, you're looking for blood on the barrel and you're looking for blowback, right? And when bullet strikes bone, or when bullet strikes an object that's full of blood, it creates a very fine mist, right? And there are micro droplets everywhere. You can't hide it. All right. And when they did luminol treatment of the garage and of course the bedroom, they found none of it. So there was no blood microspray anywhere, right? And you're correct, and Neville is correct. This represents an execution style hit. One in the back of the skull and one on the side of the skull. That's an execution style hit. It means that somebody must have put a gun barrel very close to the skull. It's scary. Alice.
There's more evidence to prove the splashback in that Teresa could have been hurt behind the back of her motor more than there ever has been that she was ever shot in Stephen's garage.
Correct. She was, but she wasn't shot. She wasn't. The blood that you see on the door, on the back door, is not from a result of a gunshot wound. It's from a hammer. It's from a,
I mean in like the
evidence.
splash off.
Yes,
that.
yes.
You know what I mean? There's more evidence there that something happened to Teresa behind
Correct.
that car with a pattern and everything like that than there ever has been to ever say that she was shot in the garage. Because you seen how messy that garage was when the
Yes.
photos and that were took. There is no way in hell Stephen or
No.
Brendan could have cleared up every single drop of blood in that bloody garage with the mess that garage was for there not to be any evidence of it.
Correct. Correct. You can't hide that evidence. They luminol the entire garage, right? And the biggest farce is that Ken, we'll talk about this, but Ken Kratz reckoned that they put Teresa on a tarp. And Bibi, that tarp must be what?
Bulletproof.
Bulletproof. It's a bulletproof
Still looking
tarp.
for where to purchase them.
Correct. Yeah. So every time there was contradictory evidence, Ken Kratz will make up a bullshit excuse to try and explain it, right? So we now know because Dr. Palanek did microtrace analysis and he stuck itomethyl under very high powerful scanning microscope. There's one thing missing: blood, tissue, and bone shards. That bullet never struck Teresa Hallbach in the skull. It never struck bone, right? So now the state has to explain how a bullet that never struck Teresa Halbach in the skull ended up with her DNA on it. Neverly, do you have a comment?
Kratz once again conveniently explained that bullshit. He said, "We never said that Ida Mafel was the one that killed her."
That's correct. So Ken Kratz is changing his story every time new evidence comes to this. But you see, this to me is the most disgraceful aspect of the case. He built up a story, Avery, in the garage, right? In court, but he never actually said Ida Mafel struck Teresa Halbach in the skull, but he implied it in the court, right? Now the evidence shows that Ida Mafel never struck Teresa Halbach in the skull, and he now goes in his book, oh, well, who said Ida Mafel struck Teresa Halbach in the skull? He completely dismissed it because he now knows that Ida Mafel is useless, forensically useless, right?
Because it cannot be matched, right?
Correct.
Just like the skull bones
Correct.
cannot be matched to Teresa. So it's all an illusion again.
You cannot match Ida Mafel to the cranial bone fragments, which means you can't then match Stephen Avery firing the rifle, firing Ida Mafel into Teresa Halbach's skull, which means you don't have a case.
So what is the whole point then?
The whole point is to create the illusion during the trial.
Exactly.
And it worked.
That's my point.
And it worked. Yes. It worked. All right, guys, do we have any other comments? It's quite clear, as Jack61 said, the state did not want to link anything to anything that they knew would weaken their case. So therefore, they had the cranial bone fragments, they had the lead embedded in the cranial bone fragments, they had Ida Mafel, they never connected the two. And Dr. Palanek proved that the two are not connected anyway. So imagine if they did that test back in 2007, there goes their case, right? Because the defense would have argued, well, hold on, you don't have a murder weapon, you don't have the bullet that caused her death, what have you got? And the answer is nothing. But what disturbs me is the bullet holes in the skull. It's execution style. Does that sound like something Stephen or Brendan would do? That looks like a gang hit. A gang hit. What do you think, guys? Never.
Sean,
I agree. I agree
shot
with you.
his wife in the head, didn't he?
Correct. Yes, she did. Yes, he did.
Yeah. And who's to say that they didn't find Teresa injured, incapacitated, but not dead, and somebody finished off the job, making sure that she's a goner?
I don't
after
know.
the fact. I know it's a speculation, but it's possible.
Yes. Yeah. It's a gruesome killing. That is for sure. All right, guys. Well, look, I'm conscious of the time and we can talk for another 4 hours, but why don't we leave it here and we can continue. I reckon next week we'll definitely finish the chapter. What do you reckon, Bibi? We'll finish the chapter next week?
Maybe. Depends on how good the questions are.
True. All right, guys. Well, look, let's just quickly go round the panel and tell us how you've been coming along and whether you've got anything to report to the group and to our listeners. Alice.
Hi, everyone. Nothing really new to report. I'm having a bad time now. I've got a swollen knee, so I'm finding it hard to walk. But been doing the usual with Just Rhonda and Cherie working on the Daniel Holtz case. And really pleased that me, Becca, and Linda are back doing Meow Meow with Brendan's post conviction. So I'm really
Awesome.
pleased that we're back doing that. And we have Daniel's bookcase on the Thursday, and just usual foul play chit chat. So
Fantastic. Well, I hope you get better soon, Alice, with your leg,
thanks, Doc.
and not even one cuss word from you. Unbelievable.
I know, it was everybody else the day.
I know, bunch of tosses. That's what I reckon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alice. BB.
It's okay. She's a little incapacitated today, so yeah, we'll let her slide today.
Awesome.
No, nothing much. Just getting ready for rally and our trip to the rally house, and looking forward to
Fantastic.
it, and making plans. Already starting to pack.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, you guys got to take a lot of pictures, and we've got to do a podcast for sure.
Oh yeah. We intend to have somebody stream it here on Discord and have
Oh,
Jack grab it
fantastic.
and put it on live while we're there.
Awesome.
That's
Thank
a
you very
plan
much.
anyway. Yeah.
That's true. Thank you, BB. Checking convictions.
Let's see. Well, me and Sean are going to do part 2 today of what we did last.
Fantastic.
We got a lot more to discuss, and there's supposed to be a special guest, so I'm not going to give that away. Somebody's going to make an appearance. We're doing the post conviction, and other than that, not too much. That's about it. Just about fighting for
No,
the
that's
guys.
huge. Yeah, and I just want to say that your interview with Wizard the other week, was just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Straight to the point, no mucking around. It was unbelievable.
That's what we're trying to kind of do that like every week. So that's what we're going to continue today.
Yep.
And discuss things that people always think about but are afraid to talk about. So I mean, Becca said it's called what grinds our gears. Well, I just think it's what's been bothering us for years.
Yep. I must admit, even I got the holy water out when I saw Wizard on there, and he let it rip. He said it as it was, and it was true words have not been spoken. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you, checking convictions, Jack 61.
Oh well, the only thing that's coming up is another open mic tomorrow.
Yes.
Haven't completely decided on what the subject matter is going to be. I've been mulling about maybe diving back into a deposition or two, or talking about some of the newer DCI reports. Was one that's very interesting.
Okay.
That we really haven't talked about too much. And other than that, just waiting for Xfinity to come and bury this cable in my yard. So they're still not here.
Yeah. Okay. All the best with that. Thank you very much, Jack 61. Just Rhonda.
Hi, thank you. Boy, a lot seems like it's going on this week for me. Also planning the trip and planning ahead for the rally in July. I'm excited to be going to that.
Awesome.
And I say there's a lot, but there's big stuff going on that could be very beneficial to Daniel. So the Attorney General, Mike Hunter of Oklahoma, resigned abruptly this last week. And yeah, he admitted that some personal information was going to be coming out that was going to, hurt his he didn't want it to be a distraction in the office, but turns out that he's been having an extramarital affair for quite some time, and then there's a scandal behind that as well that I just kind of uncovered yesterday. So that could be very helpful for Daniel because not only the judge Henderson, that presided over Daniel's case has been booted out because of serious sexual assault allegations, but now we have the Attorney General who's also been very adamant about keeping Daniel in prison, as well as Julius Jones for that matter. So now he's resigned as well. So there's lots of dirt.
Yes.
And I've got one more person that I just need to work on trying to find the dirt on and get him taken down, and that's David Prater. So this is just a lot of stuff going on, and then there's not really any movement in Daniel's case except for that the plaintiffs would like to do some more depositions, and so now we're pushing back
Yes.
again the civil trial. So but yeah, so that's got me all twisted. All of that stuff's got me twisted, and also trying to keep tweeting about Brendan and his freedom
Yes.
and things like that with Evers. And so I've just been busy on the internet this last week. So
Yes,
anyway,
you sure have. Oh, fantastic. Thank you for the update, just Rhonda.
you're welcome. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. Neverly, do you have any final comments?
All is well in the world of Neverly. Thank God. For now, knock on wood. Yeah. Just very busy in my other life. Spending a lot of time in Discord, enjoying Rhonda's podcasts. Your short clips are just brilliant, Dr. Silkman. Who needs ma'am and 20 episodes? We could just learn so much from those experts
Yes.
of 2-3 minutes at a time. No, seriously.
Correct.
And it really gets the blood boiling, not just to me, but to everybody else who's watching, because I see the comments, all people are very vocal. It's definitely
Oh,
strikes
yes.
a nerve. So
Yes.
please keep on coming. Keep on coming.
Yes.
Y-
I'm
yeah.
going to do some more. I'm going to do some more for
Yeah.
sure. I think they've really hit the mark. We've approaching nearly over 5,000 views on
Oh,
just
wow.
those short clips. And it's
Yes.
really scary because I never said one word in any of them. It's
I
them.
know.
It's
Yes.
the people
It
involved.
speaks for itself.
That's it. It does speak for itself. Straight to the point, no mucking around, under 3 minutes, and bang, there you've got it. You got it all there.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely amazing. And
Beautiful.
you learn so much from actually listening to specific aspects of the trial, and it's scary. Really
very,
scary.
very scary. Very
They
scary.
call
So
those
very,
sound bites, right?
Sound
Yes.
bites, yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
You got to
It just,
you have to be you have to pick the right scenes and put it together, because YouTube will block you if it goes slightly more than 3 minutes. But if they've got obviously an algorithm that checks it, but if you're just around 3 minutes or under, it allows it through. And I think
But
they're all powerful clips. They're
yeah,
all
the
powerful.
content is just brilliant. Good job, Dr. Silvan. Good job.
Well, normally in a trial, you might have one or two of those moments. However, the whole trial of Brendan and Stephen is full of those shocking moments. It never stops. It really
Yeah.
never stops.
And I've
Thank
noticed
you,
that this
Beverly.
is just ma'am 1, that
Ma'am
you
one.
haven't even touched ma'am 2.
I haven't
Boy,
started
I'm
that
looking
yet,
forward to
no.
it. Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I'm also enjoying hearing about the preparation for the rally. For Discord, foul play representatives are going. I am so
Yes.
happy for them, and I'm not jealous at all. Yeah.
Find your
Well, I'm
magic
still a
wand. We'll fit
possibility.
you in.
Yes. Yes.
Find your
I'm
magic
still a
wand. We'll put you in a
possibility.
closet under the stairs or something.
Thank you very much. Not that I'm a diva or anything like that. Okay, cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Neverly. Sugar, how are you going?
Oh, bit under the weather, Doc.
Oh, no.
Gonna save my breath. I don't have much.
Okay. Take it easy. Take it easy.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Susan. Gov, how are you coming along?
I'm not too bad actually at the moment. I've been saving myself today. I'm trying to maintain my energy for the next coming couple of hours. I've a
Awesome.
feeling I'm going to be needing it. We're hoping to address other issues with relation to the family, and
Yeah.
we'll get that out of the way. I'll see if we can dispel some of the commonly held beliefs with regards to Barbara's involvement in Brendan being tucked up by the sheriff's office like he was.
Yes.
So, yeah, other than that, I'm enjoying the rising sense of excitement with the coming rallies and everything else that's happening. So, yeah, all good. Trying to maintain a positive kind of spin on everything. So, yeah,
Yes.
all good. Thank you.
And no, thank you very much, Wizard. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the interview you did. Checking convictions straight from the heart, shooting from the hip, and no mucking around.
Oh, I'll call it as I see it, Doc.
You did.
You know.
Even I had to duck under the cover.
Oh, no need to do that, Doc.
Yep. No, brilliant. Thank you so much, Wizard. Much
You're welcome.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Zoe, do you have any comments?
No, I don't.
Everything's going good?
Yeah, I've been sitting away from the red button.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. And how's your boss coming along?
Don't mention the boss. The boss is sleeping.
Oh, good. Thank you so much, Zoe. And thank you for uploading all those little short clips. Much appreciated.
No problem at all.
I'll have a few more. I'll have a few more for you next week.
Oh, awesome. Can't wait.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you. Sammy, how about yourself? How are you coming along?
I'm doing well. I'm getting ready for rally, and probably after today, I'll probably need a bodyguard. So anyway, okay. How are you going along?
Me, I'm touch wood. I'm doing well. I'm feeling pretty good. So I'm still going in and out of hospitals, getting tests done, and hopefully some progress. I just need my foot to heal, my ulcer to heal, and then I'm going to have surgery, hopefully to correct my foot, and I'll be able to drive and walk again, which would be awesome. But in the meantime, I've been working on doing those little MAM clips. Yeah, it never ceases to amaze me how bad it is. Sammy.
Yeah, I love them. I love the clips. Thank you so much for all that you do.
No problems at all. No problems at all. Thank you so much. Well, look, guys. BB, do you have
one more thing real
Yes.
quick? So, how is your dog?
Well, touch wood. Much better. Touch
Do you
wood.
want to say? Do you want to say the brand name of those treats you were giving your dog and what they say about them?
You are not going to believe this, but I discovered again just by accident by reading on the internet that a specific dog treat known as a Dentastick. It's a pedigree Dentastick. Actually contains chemicals in them that, guess what, triggers seizures in dogs. And I read it by chance because a lady posted it on YouTube, and she found that by giving the dog these so-called treats that are meant to clean the dog's teeth, some dogs are extremely sensitive and allergic to what's in the Dentasticks. And I've been feeding my dog for years the Dentasticks, and for years he's been having seizures. So I've totally thrown them all out, removed them, and touch wood, it's been a week, no seizures.
So everybody hear that? Every dog owner out there hear that? What's the name of the treat again?
It's a pedigree Dentastick. They contain chemicals in them. Yeah, they contain chemicals in them that some dogs are allergic to, and it triggers seizures. And it's
Yep.
scary.
Toss them out. Don't buy them
oh
no
my
more.
God, I've tossed them all out. And touch wood, he's been good. I'm not saying that's the cure, but it contains a toxic
Hey,
chemical
every little
that
bit
builds
helps.
up. Every bit that helps. Yeah, I was scared. And what happens is when one person posts what happens to their dog when they feed them the dentist sticks, all of a sudden you get 15, 20 other people saying, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to my dog.
Yep.
They take away the dentist stick. Within a couple of days, no seizures. Wow. It's scary. Yeah. So hopefully I found the trigger for him, but it's very scary.
Wouldn't it be nice if this cured his seizures and he didn't even
Oh
need
my God.
medication or anything after this now?
Yes, the vet said that if he's seizure free, they reduce the meds. Yeah, it's very,
Wonderful.
very scary because some people have food allergies and it can trigger
Yep.
seizures in human beings. Guess what? It does the same thing in dogs. Same
Yep.
thing. So be careful, guys. If you got those things, their pedigree dentist sticks, toss them out. They've got nasty, nasty chemicals in them. Yeah, shocking. All right, guys. Well, look, thank you so much. And I'm so glad for today's discussions. Clearly, it's a very important chapter on the bones. Hopefully, next week we will finish it. Thank you so much, guys. I'd like to thank the panel. I'd like to thank the team for coming on the chat, asking all those excellent questions. Thank you so much, guys. And I will catch you all next week. Thank you.
This has been a Foul Play Function.